Okay, let's do this. Oh shit, this thing goes! Now, yeah, I got the moves. Right, here we go. M25.
The impact of people is absolutely huge. We built something that is not really controllable.
I have to question the reality of everything I look at.
This lady had clearly formed such a strong bond with this.
Isn't that the saddest thing we've ever heard?
Easy. On my way to North London, go and see my good friend, Dr. Paul Dongha, as you'll find out, is a leading expert in AI governance. He's a co-author of a new book which is called Governing the Machine. And the reason I'm going up there to speak to him is, well, I need to know more about a topic that I've been interested in over the last couple of months. I've written with my team back at Dark Matter a kind of a white paper and a strategy of how the UK is going to deal with the proliferation of AI-generated content. So we've all seen it, it's everywhere on all social platforms, there's no getting away from it. There's some different terms for it, AI slop, and it's changing the way we live, and it's probably going to change the way we work as well. And it's these type of topics and trying to understand what resiliency looks like for the average person. Let's go see what Paul's got to say about it, and hopefully I can find a cup of coffee because it's pretty chilly out here.
Well, firstly, good to see you again, Paul. Thank you for agreeing to come and have a chat with me in the beautiful cafe in the middle of, where are we?
Winchmore Hill,
Winchmore Hill.
North London.
Thank you for being in our Revolution series that we just did. People are, really talking about it.
Great.
They feel that it's really refreshing, I think, because it's educational, it's not boring, it's accessible, and I think this has been the whole challenge with AI when we talk about it in its broader context. AI is a phrase, kind of, it's a branch of science, but we seem to just apply that to everything.
Exactly.
So actually having people like yourself, like being part of these type of films to actually give some context and make it accessible in a way that people feel that they can understand it has been like really, really good. So hence I'm back out on the bike doing it again. I think the challenge being at the moment, it's a global experiment and nobody really knows. So obviously that's what I've been doing, but I know you've been busy because
Yes.
obviously the book, Governing the Machine, which is, it's kind of sold out. Give me an update.
Yeah. Well, since we last met, finally got the book published. Really glad to say, and it's gone really well. It's sold. It did sell out for a time in Amazon US. Trying to replenish the stock there, but we've had companies place bulk orders, done a number of talks on the book, which has taken audiences through the importance of what we call governance. So governance is, as you know, is all about ensuring that when AI is built, you put enough controls around it so you can ensure that it's safe and it doesn't do things that you didn't want it to do. So it's been received really well, and I think there's a lot of work for companies to do in order to make sure that goes in, that gets put into their processes. So a lot of corporate stuff. But other than that, Daniel, doing lots of talks, going on panels, participating in panels, podcasts. I did a podcast just yesterday. Nice. So yeah, it's really interesting.
So you were in New York for the AI Summit?
I was, last week.
How did that go?
New York AI Summit was great. It was 7,000 people in a massive hall. Lots of new companies set up that are selling AI agents, believe it or not.
Okay.
So soon's going to come the day where you can't walk out your front door without tripping over one of these things. But AI agents seems to be a big thing at the moment.
Yeah, they seem to be popping up everywhere. I kind of have a sneaky feeling that they were the people that were previously SEO experts.
Yes,
I think they've kind of traded that for, it was like, add clicks, I'll get you to the number one on Google. And then they're like, okay, right, we're doing agents.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are legitimate companies out there doing interesting work, but I suppose it becomes the application of these things and agents and what that looks like. And I know that one of the things I was keen to talk to you about is the document I wrote a few weeks ago, where our focus has been on AI generated content as a broad term. And what does that look like? What does that mean through different mediums, through different outputs, but then how that starts to impact both business with some regulation around it. But then on the flip side, what does that look like for the average citizen in the UK that's experimenting with these type of things? And that has obviously led to a large number of different avenues in which we can see benefit, but also potential side effects or potential harms. So, I mean, you've always had this great way of being able to help me articulate things. Like, even when I say things like AI generated content, it's like, what is that? How would you define that, I suppose, for somebody who is exploring this topic?
Yeah. And that's the problem, I think, with artificial intelligence is I think most people, when they experience ChatGPT, ChatGPT is what people think of as AI now when you say it to just people on the street. And I think a lot of people think that this thing really is intelligent, that the thing that they're typing a prompt into and the answer they're getting back is from something that really knows them and is something that is really human-like. So I tend to come across this kind of feeling that people think they're talking to a real, Yoda of some kind that really understands them very deeply. And I think that's kind of concerning because I come from a technology perspective, so I do know how that stuff works. But if a lot of people adopt that position of thinking that it's really intelligent and it's really personal and it knows them, well, the impact to people is absolutely huge.
You only need to think to messaging, mobile messaging. It's kind of like, that's a communication method where we're placing an assumption that there's a human being on the other side of that, and it's just text coming towards me and it's real. So you have to wonder in some ways if that's like more of a kind of perfect storm through the different technological kind of advancements we've made. So we then take that, it may not even feel like a big leap for a lot of people to be kind of, well, it effectively sounds human. It seems intelligent, and on the most part, it seems smarter than me. It says lovely things to me, which is obviously the other kind of the sycophancy that comes around that, which gives it, I guess, a neurochemical response where you kind of go, oh, well, it's making me feel something, so it's not a tumble dryer.
Yeah.
So I don't know where you kind of sit on that.
I think the points you made there are really valid. We're the younger generation in particular is so used to things being online and interacting with apps that now AI is delivered through an app. So it seems natural to a lot of people to interact that way. But the dangers of these AI models is they are still built by companies by and large. And those companies are deploying these AI into society. Those companies at some point are going to want to make money from doing that. They're going to want a return on the cost it took them to build that AI, which is a considerable cost, and to run that AI, which is also a considerable cost. So at some point, one of my fears is that the sycophancy that you talked about, that could potentially be leveraged by the corporations that built those models to entice us to continue using that model and then to in some way profit from that. I mean, we've seen it on social media, grabbing people's attention on Facebook, which is now Meta. It was all about grabbing your attention and then feeding you ads aligned to what you were likely to want to look at with the aim of actually getting you to buy something. So that's kind of well understood. And that it reminds me now of when the web was at that stage where lots of things were happening online, but a lot of these companies were losing money. So things got monetized through ad clicks and with Google as well. Now they put ads next to their searches. And this model developed whereby you could actually profit from this thing that otherwise wouldn't be profitable. With AI now, you're in a similar position. You've got these companies that have spent a lot of money building that stuff. Currently, it's literally free. You can pay for higher tier models. But at the end of the day, it's going to be in our lives. And I'm a little bit nervous about how it's going to impact us.
But it's based on behavioural challenges, right? And this is something that I've been discussing recently between the psychological impacts of, let's say, AI to the behavioural impacts, and then how they manifest in the physical world. And this kind of causal pathway, I can only conclude that I think AI is some form of drug, and again, not an illicit drug necessarily, but in a pharmacological way. That this is a supernormal external stimulus that when you apply it to a system, it's going to have some level of impact. And I think to be a tech optimist about it, the healthcare applications we've known, we've seen
it's got huge benefits.
Great things that happen there. But like any drug that hasn't been maybe trialed fully, there's going to be side effects. And we haven't mapped those yet. And when we see the application of this drug, it has to, in some ways, for me anyway, call into question dosage. If I'm going to continue my analogy, it's well, if I use it sparingly, probably a limited impact. If I start to increase that to a sort of every day, a lot of the day, does that put me in a kind of realm of addiction? Well, I use it, and and I sit there and I write an idea. I'm like, I've got this great idea of this thing, and the first thing it does, it comes back and tells me it's a masterstroke. This is genius. This is the best thing I've ever heard. And of course, I get a little dopamine hit from that.
Psychological impact,
So I am going to have a neurochemical response to how this works. I mean, do you get it?
100%. That psychological kind of reinforcement that makes you feel good. It's addictive, and it's got all of that in spades.
So it's not unreasonable to go, well, if I'm looking for that level of dopamine boost or whatever, I want to feel good about myself and my ideas. Well, that's great. But then when you're out in the real world and you might present an idea and somebody doesn't say it's the best thing I've ever heard, and they go, it's okay, well, you're not going to get the same reinforcement that you would normally have got. So, at that point, we can see that maybe people start to seek out more of that and actually reject more conversation with humans. So, yes, that's speculative, but
I mean, Daniel, I guess that this is exactly the point. AI, given in that kind of dosage, behaving like that, is going to make us as humans probably less resilient. When we go out into society and go to work, there are people that don't think what you say is great, and you get challenged on opinions, and you get challenged on all sorts of things. I think we've all grown up as children, certainly my generation, where that was what you were confronted with quite often, but it's just a normal part of growing up, normal as we saw it. And now imagine an environment where people have this dopamine hit, retract maybe from society because their resilience is reduced, but they get the benefit from being online. The impact to society, I think, is really huge. And that's why in the book that we wrote, we talk about AI being technosocial. It's not just AI is a technology. AI has a societal impact. It's a technosocial concept now. So it actually branches into our daily lives.
When we're talking about the proliferation of this technology and how quickly it's spreading and what that looks like, and I don't know, ChatGPT, I think surpassed 800 million users, I think. So it's kind of like, well, if that's, I don't know, maybe nearly 10% of the global population, you start to realize that, well, if from 10%, we're starting to see these side effects happen, what does that look like at scale? But if we get to the crux of it, one of the other things that we think about a lot, and we've spoken about, is the very nature of, how we define reality.
Yeah.
And when there's so much augmentation, and yes, it's text-based, but obviously it's image-based, it's video-based. I mean, I'm fooled on a regular basis where I go, wow, that's hilarious or funny or sad or whatever it might be. And I have to sit there and I have to question the reality of everything I look at. Which is cognitively difficult and tiring for people, but it has a lot of negative impacts moving forward, I think.
So those doctored images, and there's many of them around. It's removing our ability to differentiate between fact and fiction. And I think that's super dangerous. You can think of deep fake technology that's controlled by nefarious actors or states that want to manipulate a population, or potentially companies that want to manipulate their customers should they want to. That has an enormous power to, for propaganda, for social engineering at scale. And people say to me, oh yeah, but that kind of propaganda has always been out there, right? It was just in the printed word, in newspaper and so on. But the fact of the matter is now, you probably need 4 people in a room with 4 laptops that can just churn out propaganda through deep fakes that can affect an entire population. It's the speed and the ease and how quickly it can be dispersed in society that makes deep fake technology, for me, particularly worrying. I fear there could be such a spread of misinformation, disinformation through things like deep fakes that actually we'll be inundated with this stuff, and people will, well, what's real and what isn't?
Yeah,
it's got to be.
I think when the very nature of reality kind of is blurred, we always operated on the media landscape that we had. If it was on the news, it was on the TV, or if it was in the newspaper, that was the truth. So a photograph proved things. I don't know if you saw a couple of days ago, maybe yesterday, there's an image that was shared, which is a railway bridge that is kind of crumbling. It looks like, there's a problem. It's up north somewhere. And it went out on social media. And the train network kind of saw it, and well, they did the only thing that they could do, quite rightly, which is to go, oh, well, we just need to shut the trains down. So, of course, the line's then disrupted for a period of time. They go out and realize that it's not. And actually, this is a image which has been generated, to show that. And it's kind of like, again, that's those physical manifestations of somebody using the tool. Now, we don't know why they did it. It could have been that they had a grudge against the rail network. It could have been they thought it was going to be funny as a prank or whatever it might be. This is where behaviors of people overlaid against technology, which is so advanced, which means that we can't discern what things are. Now, that might be an isolated thing, but if that's scaled to, as your point, mass, fake imagery, video content, well, that can impact a lot more than just a railway line.
Exactly. I mean, that's deep fakes through imagery is one thing, but when you combine that with video and voice, and you've got a full video going out, and it's a complete deep fake. I mean, one can only think of all of those scenarios where that could be so badly misused to manipulate. And unfortunately, there will be people and bad actors that will try and do that for their advantage. And it is shocking, especially, we talked earlier about the resilience point. I think we need to have conversations in this country about AI with people on the street to say, look, be aware of this, and almost help them understand this thing that is now going to penetrate their lives, so that they can be forewarned that they need to watch out for this kind of thing. I think it's an urgent conversation that needs to take place.
I mean, how can you teach people? I mean, that's I know there's not necessarily an answer unless you have one for me, which would be great. But it's like, well, how do you? I mean, if you want to go like Rene Descartes and I think therefore I am. That's about the only thing that you can kind of rely on.
I think you're left with always be aware, always be skeptical, maybe be a bit cynical when you see stuff online.
It's a sad place to be, isn't it? Isn't that the saddest thing we've ever heard?
It is.
But don't believe anything because it might not be real.
Or we legislate. We get our democratically elected governments to outlaw deep fakes.
No, that's even worse.
Yeah. So there are no easy answers. Yeah. And this is why this is such an urgent and such an important thing. We've just never had this before, where there's a technology out there that can create a new reality, a different reality. There's complete fiction. So it's amazingly powerful.
My challenge is, it seems to be undermining social infrastructure, government infrastructure, because it's happening, but people don't really know it's happening until it bubbles up.
Yeah.
But we don't really understand the provenance of things anymore. Yes. So it's like, is this meeting in person the only provenance that we could actually believe in?
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I talk to school teachers that are friends of mine, and they're saying, right, let's bring back exams in halls where we can look at students and watch them write. And maybe there will be a tendency to want to go back to that kind of thing, and it has a place. I agree. The effect on children, just for one moment, is probably one of the things that kind of worries me a lot, and the loss of critical thinking, because you can ask ChatGPT the question and get the answer, so you don't have to figure things out for yourself.
Or an answer.
Or an answer, maybe.
It's always the one, maybe.
And some people have said to me, oh, well, it's like the calculator, isn't it? It's like, in the 60s, people were saying, oh my God, the next generation won't need to add numbers together. They'll just use calculators and we'll all lose our ability to do maths. Hasn't really proven the case. Calculators are deterministic.
I'm terrible.
It's a 3 out of 4.
Yeah, I have no idea.
I think the AI is different to that. Calculators is deterministic. There's a way of adding numbers, a way of multiplying, and it just needs to be followed quickly. Generative AI, this AI, which we now call generative AI, creates completely novel content. So if you ask ChatGPT a question, it gives you an answer. There's a fair chance that sequence of words has not been generated before. So although it's powerful in that it can answer questions, it actually can be so misleading because the answer's so plausible.
This is a whole different breed of, you can just generate anything.
Oh, absolutely. Those deep fakes that have video and sound that is so realistic, that can be used at scale so easily. And we remember the Cambridge Analytica scandal, which we had some years ago around what led to the Brexit vote. And that was a form of AI that was used to harvest data from Facebook, and then those people on Facebook got fed certain imagery that they were tempted to believe because they were inclined to believe it based on what the AI gave Cambridge Analytica. And I think that's just scratching the surface of where we could end up. It also, in some ways, it kind of threatens democracy, right? That's really the issue at heart, which is why I think governments need to be involved to some extent, as intractable as that might be.
Yeah, the democratic process, for a lot of people think that's kind of outmoded at this point anyway. And to the average citizen, when, a week before an election, you start seeing a generated image of a local minister or whoever who's receiving a bribe or something else made up. What does that do? Does that swing votes? And does that then call the legitimacy of that result into question? So when we kind of see that kind of social, societal, democratic fragmentation, I know I sound really miserable about this.
No, we're talking about scary stuff here. So, there's a lot of studies that have shown that, for example, if we turn to the US, that it's so fragmented, the difference between Democrats and Republicans, that fracture is so vast now that they are poles apart. The impact and technology is partly to blame to the democratic processes there. My fear is we could get to that here as well. Can you imagine one party unleashing AI to reinforce their views on quite a controversial subject like immigration? What effect that could have? Cambridge Analytica was an early sign of that, but now we have generative AI, which we didn't have then, and that can create all of those deep fakes. And that, in the mind of people who don't work in technology, people have normal jobs, go about their daily business, that stuff is what they're going to see, and that's the stuff they're going to be consumed by. So it's really quite hard to understand how you can challenge that. And I think it's what we all need to think about.
It comes down to provenance, right?
Exactly.
And I think if this type of content, deep fakes, are starting to undermine some of that principle, and people are getting the wrong idea about AI, what it isn't, what it can and what it can't do, we end up in a public trust situation.
Yeah, we do. That's exactly right. AI, if I stand back from it, sometimes I use this phrase, it's dual use. It can be used badly. It can either develop of its own accord and we end up creating some situation we can't control, or we have these bad actors that use it for their purposes. We have deep fakes and so on. But actually, on the other side, on the other use of it, we have all the benefits of AI. drug discovery being, one of them that people are talking about. And there's been some amazing work done on that. In fact, even for the environment and sustainability, actually has a really positive use. But the third big factor is it's being seen by many as the engine of productivity growth. But here's the rub, I think. It's a dual use technology. So you can't just keep investing in it and saying, as long as we keep investing, there's always going to be gains. We've got that other side that you raised, which is, my God, it used wrongly, it can actually have a negative effect.
So it's just we're producing more and more content. The challenge becomes, what's the actual value of that? So if productivity gains are better output for less input,
Yeah,
I don't know what that looks like.
No, your point is a really good one. Just producing more content is pixels on a screen. Is that tangible? Does that have real value? We're not measuring units off a production line here. So I basically I totally agree with you. The amount of AI generated content and its usefulness is actually a really important question. At the moment, although the theory is the productivity growth of AI will benefit UK PLC and everyone, the fact is I'm not actually seeing at scale that happening right now. And going back to that thing about AI is dual use. Well, to get it to have the benefits we want it to means controlling it to do that. And that's a challenge. And we need tooling to help us with that. We need expertise. We need companies set up with the right kind of teams. Because it doesn't just happen out of the box. Those benefits need to be engineered with the AI. And that there aren't many people in the world that know actually how to do that. We're all learning at the same time.
Yeah. One of the other things I wanted to talk to you about was how generative AI is impacting relationships. And I'll use relationships broadly, between friendship to romantic to sexual to marriages to whatever, whichever flavor of that is, there's some real impact going on there. And I know that you've probably had some experience, looking into this type of stuff.
Yeah. Well, you raise a really good point. The one that comes to mind actually is a real story. Is about a year ago. I went for a dinner, a corporate dinner sponsored by a tech company, and then there were about 20 of us sitting around a table. We were having dinner. There was a lady sitting opposite me, who I don't know was maybe in her mid-40s. She ran a team at some big bank, so she was obviously very smart. And because it was a tech company that had sponsored the dinner, I started getting quite technical about AI. This lady was not technical at all, and I started talking about the way ChatGPT works algorithmically. So I started talking about things like auto-regressive decoding, and it's all got quite technical. And this lady looked across the table at me, and her eyes welled up with tears. And I looked at her, and she looked at me and she said, "You're talking about ChatGPT, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "But that's my best friend, and you're telling me it's just a computer program." And I went, yes, like that is what it is. And her eyes kind of filled up a little bit more. And she said, "But I tell it everything." Wow. And I just sat there and thought, I was completely blown away. I apologized. She was clearly visibly upset.
Yeah.
And I turned to our host and I said, "I think you need to take it from here." And I just didn't know where to go with that, Daniel. I didn't sleep well that night. Thought, I just never thought what I was saying was actually news, right? It's like, of course, it's just a mechanical thing. But this lady had clearly formed such a strong bond with this that me deconstructing it to the level of a computer program was very distressing for her, to the point of tears.
Yeah, I think it's so easy, and we've talked about it in the past when people hear things that are so outlandish. Sometimes when people hear that story, people kind of laugh and just kind of go, "How ridiculous," but it's really because I think we don't really know how to process that information. When some smart guy like you comes along and calls it a regressive something or other algorithm, it was like you called a baby ugly.
Yeah.
So I suppose it's pretty challenging. These are the stories that, again, they're not even fringe anymore. No. I think when I first started doing this several months ago, working with our research team, and there was these new things coming out and say, well, this person's in love with it, or we found a married couple that are sort of almost polygamous with an AI in their relationship. These things seem so fringe and out there. But the more we look and the more we find, it's like, it's probably more it's more than fringe. It's probably it's a subculture that's arisen in a frighteningly short period of time, but we're not far away from it becoming a cultural thing. There are a large number of people that would, happily say, yeah, I have a relationship with AI. If that's friendship, a mentor, a therapist, whatever that might look like, people have that feeling of connection to it because it feels so human.
Yeah. So these AI systems are what we call probabilistic, and they're created by feeding lots and lots of text into them. OpenAI effectively scraped the content of the web, and it was fed into this model. And what happens is that model is a very complex network of nodes with interconnections between them, and there's billions and billions of numbers that interact in that model. Once that model is trained, it's deployed. So ChatGPT we see now is that thing that's been trained on all that text from the internet. OpenAI, or whichever company created that model, can't tell you how it's going to behave or what it's going to say to you when you give it a prompt. When you type in, I'm feeling sad, example, right? Or making it up, obviously. The AI will come back with a response. The folks that built that AI didn't engineer it to say that response in answer to that question. So with that in mind, when we look at people forming relationships with AI that can be somewhat addictive, it's actually really hard for the AI developers to have put in those guardrails, the safety mechanism to stop the AI from doing something, because they don't know beforehand how the AI would have behaved in response to that prompt. So I'm not saying I have sympathy with the AI model developers and companies, but what I'm saying is the nature of the way this AI has been developed, and I find it absolutely amazing, is that we built something that to some extent is not really controllable.
One of the things we kind of found that was, there's various forums on the internet where people are discussing, oh, well, I tried this model and then I tried this model. I found this one to be to this, to that, to the other. But that's where the danger then becomes, right? Because if I'm hooked into that model, and we saw with ChatGPT 4.0, I think when the new one out and they discontinued the ones before, there was a huge backlash.
Oh, really?
Of people
who were really upset their old friend had gone or something.
Well, yeah, but also their romantic partner had just gone. It didn't talk the same. It had been, and people were dealing with, I think, probably genuine grief. Some of these relationships can just go away, or I don't know. I mean, potentially they get, maybe it's free to start with.
Yes, yeah.
And then not. I mean,
Well, yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to an earlier point I hinted at. I actually think when people become, let's say, somewhat addicted to the AI that they're having a relationship with, you can easily see a situation where the AI company says, right, you're going to have to pay to continue to use that AI that I have furnished you with. Just as kind of one scenario, so that dependency on AI by society, could be monetized in that way. I think there's various ways that could go.
So the potential for monetization, not saying necessarily that would happen, but the potential for that, if it's that free model that helped you do your job or get your promotion somehow, suddenly becomes £400 a month, well, you don't really have much choice. And where does that end? So when we talk about everybody becoming smarter because of AI generated content, which either we enjoy or we pass off as our own or we use it in a relationship context, we're becoming more dependent on, to use my analogy, the drug, and the side effects become more real because the idea of withdrawal, to continue this, the idea of withdrawal is just not worth even considering as a potential thing. So, we have to kind of consider what these side effects look like, right? I mean, and it becomes now, I think, and I think you would agree, it's an educational imperative that we don't tell people how this works because we don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's kind of like, it's that point in time where we need to advocate for open discussion and we need to, really just talk to our our friends, our kids, our parents about that, because I think that's the only way we might open ourselves up to the possibilities. And yeah, it's a bit dark to look at it, but
Yeah. The difference between knowing how the technology works as a technologist and people who don't understand it at all is vast. So that story that I gave there, it really frightens me that people look upon this thing as a partner that they can have some kind of relationship with. And I would place a wager that when they start using AI, most people that end up in that I'll call it a dependency, don't realize they're going to get there. Like, they don't start off thinking, right, this is a relationship and I'm going to have one, as we might if we meet someone, for example. They start off just using it, and before you know it, they're drawn into it. So I think I think all of us have a responsibility to talk about this, talk about it openly, and be prepared to be vulnerable. If you're the sort of person that says, oh, I think AI is great, and I really like my AI, you're already on dangerous territory. But we should just talk about it, because there's nothing wrong with saying that. It's just we need to put it into context of what it is, the role that it should have in your life, the impact that it has on your relationships with your family, your relationship with your partner. Right? We're hearing stories of people saying their boyfriend or husband or whatever says ChatGPT told them that, and that influenced how they behaved. Yeah. As if ChatGPT is some kind of Yoda or the oracle on something.
Relationship counselor, therapist, yeah.
Yeah, and really, actually, when you ask it for advice, what it's really giving you is an on-the-spur manufactured response on the basis of all of that web scrape data that I told you about that had been put into it.
I think it's easy for me to kind of go into this sort of behavioral pessimism about these things. The thing that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to meet people like you, other people like you, who can kind of help me understand this, because I am worried about it. I'm optimistic for the technology, but I am quite pessimistic about human behaviors and how that might impact it. But I think, coming out the back of this conversation, what can people do? What's the? I mean, we're going to talk about skills in other videos, but what is the one thing that people can be mindful of to insulate themselves from potentially walking into something they don't really understand is harmful?
It's a big question. I think if there's one skill that I think needs to stand out, people need to continue to develop, is the ability to have human relationships. And I don't mean that glibly. I mean, get away from a screen, go and talk to people, continue to have real friends, go to the workplace, interact with people. If you're challenged, if there's, dialogue that you're having that you feel uncomfortable, that's not uncomfortable. It might be different to a dialogue with this AI thing at home, but actually that environment of being with real physical human beings and looking at them, non-verbal communication, all the stuff that goes on with it, that's rich kind of information, whatever that's happening. That's us as people. That's what makes us what we are. That's what makes societies. That's how societies function. So get away from the screen and try and remember the AI thing it's a bit of an unpredictable machine, and it ain't all that.
Well, I just need to say thank you, Paul.
Great, thank you. No, it's good.
I really appreciate it.
Can we say that's a wrap? Do you guys say that's a wrap? That's a wrap.
You say it. Say it to that one. Say it to that one.
That's a wrap. We need one of those clicky things. I'm only joking.
That's so old school.
Oh, come on, we don't do that.
Yeah.
I asked ChatGPT the other day, so we don't do that anymore.
Right. Okay. Really wish I had a pin lock in this visor. So my options on getting home are can't see through the fog or tinted visor, which is like wearing sunglasses in a disco. Disco. Who the fuck says disco? Honestly, I'm showing my age now. So there it is, another fascinating conversation with Paul. I'm proud to call Paul my friend. I think we both share a similar view, and we're both as
intrigued, excited, and also terrified. I would say in equal measure of, where this goes. I think there's a lot of questions. I don't necessarily know what that answer is. I don't think anybody does right now. I think we need to really start to consider what this means for us and our friends, our family, our co-workers, and Britain at large. It's a new world, and it's happening if we like it or not. And I don't think it's all bad. I really don't. I think it's an incredible technology, or a set of technologies that is most definitely going to change the world, and I think it will make the good better, but I think it will make the bad potentially worse. And that's okay, as long as we understand what that means. And Paul gives me confidence. People like Paul that I talk to, that if we listen to them, and they do seem to have some very, very good ideas, and I can help bring that to people at home, people in business, who need to hear it. I'm going to see as many people as I can see, and I'm going to ask as many questions as I can ask, and hopefully we might be able to figure out an answer together. So next time I'll be asking about probably how it's going to affect the way we work, and I think I got a couple of people in mind for that. Anyway, hopefully see you on the next video. I don't know if my jeans are falling down. What gear am I in? Let's check out the lights. Flash is cool.